All right, it's 4 o'clock, so I'll call the meeting to order. Special meeting of council to consider possible new municipal office. And the first item is adoption of the agenda. Moved by Katie Davies, seconded by Ron Forbes, that the agenda be adopted as printed and circulated. Are there any issues with the agenda? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Not seeing any. We go on to the one and only item on the agenda then, item 5.1, reports from staff, Corporate Services Department, Memorandum 2021-123 from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding the Township Municipal Office and the Canada Community Revitalization Fund CCRF grant program. Dawn, is there anything you want to highlight for council before I ask them for questions?
I will just run through a very brief PowerPoint just on a couple of highlights from the report. So the existing office was built in 1967. It's 3,200 square feet finished up and down. The lower section that we're sitting in now was added in 1987, and it's 2,900 square feet finished. There is complete finish on the lower level, but there is no windows, and there's only one access point, so that it couldn't be used for staff right now without a second entrance in the basement. Substantial renovations were carried out in 2010 to modernize the 67 building, and we added additional office space in the basement. While the building is in very good shape, there are a number of functional issues with the layout, as well as a lack of compliance with AODA standards. And just to be clear before we go on, we do not need to meet the AODA standards by any certain time frame. It is recommended that public bodies do that, and there are some functional issues that I will just touch on now. So the kitchen facilities are located in the basement. There are inadequate washroom facilities for the number of staff. So we are short one washroom right now for handicap accessibility. The washrooms don't meet current standards under the building code for turning space, as well as not having automatic openers. The front counter height is too high. We would have to drop the counter down to accommodate persons with disabilities. The council chamber doors are not accessible. They would need to be automatic openers on those as well. Some of the hallways upstairs and down are not accessible and need to have barrier-free paths of travel throughout. From a functional point of view, right now the public do walk through the office to get to the council chambers, and people do congregate in the hallways, which again is not an ideal situation. We do not have sufficient storage on the main level, so for blue boxes and rain barrels and that type of product, we have to store it in the lobby and or the doorway, so it's not ideal. We don't have an adequately sized meeting room other than the council chambers for holding meetings, and there are no private offices for the mayor or council members to meet with the public, which that does happen a fair bit with Mayor Ryan and Katie and Councillor Davies using the council chambers to meet with people, so it is not ideal. So the first option is the technical services building, and as outlined in the report, there are many variables that would need to be addressed for the financial model to work, such as the sale price of 3 properties would have to meet budget estimates. So there's a lot that would have to happen, in our favor to make that happen. Access to the site would be limited to one street until later phases of the Kingwood development proceed. Ongoing demolition on the Kingwood site will be happening for the next 2 to 3, possibly 4 years. Municipal office is located on the 2nd floor. Some of the strong points is that the building would be purpose-built and meet all AODA standards, would provide much needed licensed childcare for Zorra residents, and it would be the lowest cost per square foot to build out. Option 2 would be renovate at this present location. So in order to address the functional deficiencies of our office, it would be recommended that we would add approximately 4,200 square feet to convert existing council chambers into a barrier-free offices to relocate staff from the lower level, a new council chamber, a mayor's office, a councilor's office, an adequately sized committee room, a kitchen on the main level, a storage room for blue boxes, composters, rain barrels, etc., separate staff washrooms from public washrooms, as well as a main reception area and lobby. Some of the impediments on the site, the septic system is located just outside the office to the north. There's a grassed area that is where the tank, or where the field bed is located, so we are quite limited on the site. The 1967 building would still not be accessible. We would also not meet the parking requirements of the zoning bylaw. We would be deficient by about 15 spots. Option 3 is a new build, and there's not been a lot of data gathered on this, other than to say it would be the highest cost option and would require debt financing. It would be a single-use building. However, it would have an excellent location on Brock Street with full municipal services available. So looking at the draft layout for the technical services building, level 1, it's proposed to have a child care facility at the south of the building with an access off the vestibule. The fitness facility would also be located on the main level. There would be an elevator and stairs right at this spot to go up to the township office. We did have probably about 4 or 5 sendbacks to Spreed Associates before we were satisfied with the office layout. I think the good point of this layout is it makes it available for members of the public. So we do have the council chambers, committee room, mayor's office, and councilor's office off the lobby that could be used for nighttime meetings without any interruption or anyone accessing the office space. There would be a drop-down gate across the front desk, and all the doors leading off the lobby would be locked, and they would be key card controlled or key fob controlled. So it would offer some space for community groups to use the committee room or the council chamber for that matter. The third floor, we would propose to have meeting rooms that would be used by members of the public that could be rented on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. And likely we would be able to build out probably 6 or 7 offices. The remainder of the third floor would be used for storage, for municipal purposes, for a lot of the stuff, I'll call it, that we have in our basement here. Going to the second option, so I've crudely sketched out where the 2 potential builds could go on this office. The one to the south would be a tear down of the 1967 building and then building about 7,200 square feet on ground level at the same level as this building, which would make the entire structure accessible. There would be a fair amount of disruption and displacement of the staff during construction. It's probably going to be a 6 to 8 month process to build that. The second option is to add on at the north end of the building, so just outside the council chambers here, and that would be approximately 4,200 square feet. Again, that would limit the parking for the site from what we would be required to have under the zoning bylaw, and we'd have to be very careful that we did not hit any of the septic lines because some of them do go underneath the pavement. So those are the options that are before council today. And Schedule C on the report just offered some broad-based estimates after speaking with the engineer and seeing what like projects have been going for in the last little while. The technical services building, that construction cost of $145 a square foot includes finish on the third level. So the net cost to the township, if all the cards fall in our way of property sale amounts, we would be short $365,000 from what the budget would be at, starting at 0. There are ways to mitigate that by not finishing that third level or not finishing as much as we would really like to. So there is an option to have that 365 drawn down a bit. Municipal office renovations here, that would be the cheapest option, is simply adding on to the north side of this building, and based on the costs that we're seeing right now and the anticipated revenues, we would still come out ahead a little bit on that one by the time we sold some of the other properties and use the proceeds from the Kingwood sale. Option B is tearing down the 1967 building and building at ground level, and that would see a net cost of $660,000 that we would have to come up with, either through a short-term debenture or a longer-term debenture. And finally, the most expensive option, the single-use building, would be a greenfield site at 149 Brock Street. And that net cost would be approximately $1.3 million. So I think at that point, Mr. Mayor, I would leave it open for questions from council.
Questions from council on the report? Katie?
I have a really quick question of clarification. Can we go back to the previous slide with all of the calculations? Yeah. The technical service building is showing a net cost of negative $365,000. So does that mean that I didn't play out the math? My understanding, but as I'm hearing you, I think I might be misunderstanding. It would cost that much more than what we would raise in revenue, or that's what we would have $365,000 left over after?
It would be a shortfall.
It would be a shortfall.
Correct. So we would have to come up with an additional $365,000 to finish 2 levels and some of the third level.
Okay, and then the net cost for municipal office renovation B, we would have to come up with $660,000?
Correct.
So they're the same thing, I just didn't understand the negative.
Yeah.
Like those numbers are the same, so, okay.
Yeah. So if you look at the total expenses, in 3 of the 4 options, the expenses are greater than the revenues.
So the red versus black is
Correct.
the, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Correct.
Anyone else? Questions? Paul?
The technical service building, Don, right now my understanding is that we own it as part of the purchase, but we've agreed to sell it to Kingwood as part of the next phase. So what's it going to cost us to not sell it to Kingwood, or to keep it, or buy it back, or what's the value of that building as it sits there right now?
An exact dollar figure has not been discussed with Kingwood, but we are talking a very minimal amount.
Not enough to impact the,
Financial projections, no.
okay. Because at one point we were talking about swapping this for some other property, but that's not
No, I
something
would,
that we're looking at now?
no, I would think right now, based on what Kingwood would have to do to bring that building up to standards, it's more of a liability to them than it would be for us, for our use.
Anyone else? Questions? Rob?
The daycare and the fitness center, is that municipally run? Are those tenants? How's that going to work?
So the way that municipalities typically operate daycares is especially in Oxford County, they would RFP out for an operator, and then the operator would pay the municipality an ongoing rent. The fitness facility, I don't think we would run that. We would probably look to an operator like the Y, looking at their various costing models. There are costs involved for a municipality to have the Y provide that service for municipalities. So it would look like the cost model would almost come out neutral by the time we get rent from the daycare for what it would cost to operate the fitness facility.
And what about the rest of the building? Like that, like, that's a huge building. We're only talking a portion of it yet, like the actual or west side of that building. It's not being used yet.
So the west side would not be owned by the municipality. That would be retained by Kingwood, and they do have a party that's very interested in that, in the west side. So the center party wall would be the dividing line, so it would be done under part lot control, and the municipality would own the east side of it only. There would be independent heating, cooling systems, everything is virtually self-sufficient on either side of that party wall.
That's what you just finished talking about, that's where YFM comes in?
I believe that is one of the interested parties, yes.
Okay.
So of the three other uses, which was the daycare, the recreation, or the gymnasium, and potentially a grocery store, the township would have nothing to do with the grocery store part of it?
No, that would be separately owned and separately operated, so that
Okay.
would, yeah, nothing to do with us.
And the dollars that are outlined here for construction costs, and if you said it before, I missed it, I apologize. That just covers the portion of the of the building that would be the municipal office, the gymnasium, and the daycare,
Correct.
The
And
rest
also-
of it.
And also a little bit on the third floor as well, too.
and the third floor.
Correct.
Okay. So it would be up to Kingwood to do whatever to the rest of the building.
Exactly. That's correct.
Okay.
It would be done in concert so that we would, it would have a similar roof. Each building might have, or each half might have their own different siding, but it would be done at the same time.
Of course. And we could coordinate that with them so that we wouldn't end up doing our part and it would be all nice and theirs would sit there derelict for 2 years or something. We have the ability to coordinate that with Kingwood. They're open to that kind of discussion.
Yes, that's been discussed with Kingwood, so that if this project did go ahead, it would be done in concert.
Anyone else? Questions? Ron?
In your report, you mentioned there was possible street costs involved in this, or the intersection at Brock Street?
It would depend on the services that need to go in at that intersection. There may need to be a bit of a smoothing at that intersection. There is a curb that's not cut right there, so we would have to have Public Works look at that a bit closer to see if there would be major work there, but it shouldn't be too substantial. The road leading south from the east gate is a wide road. It would likely just need to be repaved. And if Kingwood needed to install services, it would be done at their cost before we would start using that road. So if they did have to put their own storms and sanitary down the road, that would all be done first before we would be able to use it.
But, so street development is still Kingwood's cost in
Correct.
this scenario?
Correct.
And associated servicing.
Yes. So there would likely need to be, right now, the building is served through the old sanitary sewer line that runs south from the Maple Leaf property down to the wastewater treatment plant. That will be abandoned once the subdivision starts, so we will have to put a secondary stub out of the building during construction, just to make sure that we did have a future connection, because that line will be abandoned. And there would have to be some water line work done too, but again, the necessary work would be done, and we would plumb the building so that it would be easy to install once the full servicing is done on the subdivision.
I wanted to circle back to the non-municipal aspects of the municipally owned side of the building. The daycare would serve as a bit of a revenue generator. There's added cost up front to finish that space, but that would serve as a revenue generator, and beyond that, that would be providing I cannot tell you how much needed service to residents of Zorra. as well as people who work in Zorra and reside outside of Zorra. But as well as the office spaces, that's another thing that people are often looking for, is places to, have a home-based business and need an office space or just a conference room here and there. But the gym, can you tell us more about, I kind of thought that would also provide some revenue generation as well. So if we're paying to finish out the space, and then if we had a provider like YMCA come in, we have to pay them to come in, and then do they then in turn operate their business at profit? And do residents then just have access, or do we then have the ability to recoup some of the costs through membership passes, or how does that work?
Right now, the Y has about 10 different funding models they use across southwestern Ontario, and it's based on the size of the community. So it's something that we really haven't delved into with the Y yet, but we would have to. Matt Brown did work on the agreement with Middlesex Center when he was at Middlesex Center, so there is an operating agreement that the municipality has with the Y for that. There's currently one under construction in Watford, which would be smaller than Chelmsford, so we would again be able to look at their cost model for that. So the Y is willing to work with us to see what's going to be best for the Chelmsford community.
Do you have another one?
I mean, this was never even on our radar for a little while, this whole process. And then all of a sudden, yeah, it seemed like there's a possibility to use that tech services building. And then it was kind of, okay, if we could do it for nothing, maybe we do it. And then there's possibility of a grant has showed up from the government. And then I look at it, and we're still $300,000 short. And building here almost looks like the better idea, but again, we weren't even considering that. I mean, yeah, there's dysfunction in this building, and not really dysfunction, just there's things that it's not up to 2021 standards, or I'm getting an uneasy feeling that we're running instead of walking here. So I think it has. I mean, I don't have a problem with going forward with what we're suggesting to go forward with, some public consultation, maybe some more in-depth looking at it. But I think it's got to come up a whole lot better than it does right now before we should actually do that. But having said that, there is some unforeseen advantage, or not unforeseen, but there is some advantages. That whole area in Chelmsford, where we're going to tear down that turkey plant and the grain elevators and that whole brownfield development there, we need an anchor tenant, so to speak, or landowner, and if that's the township, that might be the advantage. But I just think I need a whole lot more information other than some pretty broad pen strokes that we got right here, and maybe that'll come from future investigation into this. But a little concerned at the moment.
Paul?
Yeah, I'm right with you, Ron. This is a lot of money that we weren't looking at. Marcus, I take it that the purpose of this meeting was to decide whether we would pursue one or more of these options for the purpose of applying for this grant, which has to be in by Friday, right? That's the reason we have a special meeting. And that's the core, and that there's a resolution to do with what?
Yes.
I have a bunch of comments to make, but I would,
Yeah.
I would think maybe if
You'd
I
rather
knew,
speak
if
to a-
I knew
speak
what
to a
the
motion.
resolution was, my comments could be more,
Yeah.
so unless somebody
Well,
else wants a
Steve had his
bunch of
hand up, so we'll
questions.
see if he has a question, and
Yeah.
I'll go around once more for questions, and if there aren't, then I'll read the motion that I have, and we'll go to debating that. Steve?
Real simple. The technical services building, we've got the $750,000 penciled in there from the grant. Is it a guarantee?
No
Because
grant-
otherwise that number jumps from 365 in the hole to one, well, more than that, yeah.
Yeah, it would jump up to about 1.1 million. So at that point, it's not sustainable. So if, without the grant, there would have to be substantial cuts to that building, perhaps just doing the daycare and municipal office and leaving.
So no grant, it would just get canned.
Or it may take a different form.
Okay.
Anybody else, questions? Okay. Moved by Katie Davey, seconded by Ron Forbes, that Zorra Township Council support the Canada Community Revitalization Fund grant application for the Zorra Municipal Centre. Katie, as the mover, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think I can just carry on from the conversation that just started there. You know, this project is going to change drastically depending on the outcome of this grant. And before we, zoom in any closer than these broad pen strokes of numbers, I think that's going to be a key piece to this. There's aspects of this that, it wasn't quite on the radar, but there are some constraints in this building that are undeniable and at some point are going to have to be addressed. And if this is the timing and the opportunity to do this as effectively as possible, then it'll be easier to make that decision once we have more information. And I think that that grant application outcome is going to really help that. So, so I'm in full support of applying for that funding and see what the outcome is and go from there.
Ron?
Yeah, I support going ahead with the grant. I mean, even if we get the grant, we can all of a sudden say, no, we don't want it. So certainly put in the application and go through the motions for that grant. But I don't think municipal office A or B is good management of our funds as far as the municipality goes, given all the, we've been down in this corner for 50 years and there's always been mention of moving this office. I think the answer was to go north instead of west, but being in the larger urban center of the township, I think makes sense too. So for me, we apply for the grant and we take a run at the tech service building renovation. And I'm not sure I would rule out the greenfield if we were going to do that too, but the greenfield, but spending money here, I'm not sure that makes sense to me. The lot small is the big one. We're on the border of Ingersoll, which may be in Ingersoll someday. I hope not, but it could be. So I think a move is better than spending money to renovate this building here. So if, I'd almost take A and B off that list and just study Greenfield and Tech Service Building.
As far as the grant, I think it's obviously a pre-election handout, and just the one industry that in Canada that doesn't need stimulating right now is the construction industry, but that's what governments do. They hand out infrastructure money. I think we have to be realistic that chances of us getting $750,000 out of this are slim and none. And I would be surprised if we got anything more than a token. Because $500 million looks like a lot of money until you divide it over 2 years, divide it over the entire country, and then divide it among nonprofits, municipality, public institutions, and indigenous communities. So when you spread it out that thin, it's going to be a long line of people with their hands out for this grant, and we're going to be at the back of the line because it's the stated purpose is to help recover from COVID, and we've had individuals who have suffered financially from COVID, but as a municipality, we did okay that's the main reason we didn't have to raise taxes this year. And the hard reality of the way this works at that level is this money's going to go where the votes are, and we're a conservative, we're not a liberal riding. So we're not going to be high on their list to get this money. As far as what we're going to use the money for, I can't justify spending money to renovate or expand the municipal offices. When I made the motion almost 2 years ago that we look at including municipal office in the ZMF building, it was primarily because this location was not accessible to most of the people of Zorra Township. And we've made huge strides through technology to address that. People can watch this meeting or any council meeting they want, live stream it, or they can go back later and watch it. They can just pick out the parts of the meeting they want to watch. So it's way more accessible, that part of it, than it's ever been before. People, if they want to attend a meeting, can do so virtually, whereas that was an issue before, and one of the reasons I brought the motion up before, or when we talked ZMF. And so as far as accessibility, I think we've gone a long way to addressing that. The building is flawed, and I agree with the report. There are some things that are in there, and I went through, and I think there's all those things that are pointed out in the report can be fixed without spending millions of dollars to do it. So the only of those four proposals, the only ones I would be prepared to even consider is the technical services building, and that's because the other the opportunities to provide the daycare and to a lesser degree the gymnasium. My understanding when on the initial report was that we would be involved in the grocery store aspect of it. I'm glad to know that we're totally hands off on that, because we're crossing another line here as to what we need to provide as a municipality. And when we decided, the previous council decided to replace the old Thamesford Fire Hall, and we decided to replace the two public works buildings, that has to do directly with services that we're required to provide, fire services and road maintenance. And the facilities that we had were just so outdated, they were totally inefficient to the point that you couldn't get a new fire truck in, and we've seen how crowded the equipment is in the public works buildings. And we also have huge health and safety issues with those buildings, and I don't see that. We've got some inconveniences here in this building, but I don't think we have health and safety issues that we need to address. So I agree that we go ahead with the grant. I don't think it will amount to a hill of beans, to be quite honest. And but I also would support looking further into what we can do with the technical service building. It's a good, solid old building, but on the other hand, it's not we're not preserving a heritage building that's been here for 100 years and that people love and would hate to see torn down. If all the other numbers work out that we can do it at break even, or that we can generate enough revenue from the two services that we're providing that we can service a small amount of debt, and to make that happen, we need to sell this property and move the municipal building, then that's something I would consider. But as far as just spending a pile of money on new municipal offices, considering we're still paying for the Thamesford Fire Hall, we're still getting the ZMF out of the ground, I think that this proposal has to wait for another time.
Anyone else? Steve?
I would say it's a definite that we go for the grant. I'm no idea what the odds are of getting it all. No, I we toured the technical services building. In my mind, it's inevitable the population of our township is going to grow and continue growing. That means municipal staff are going to grow and continue growing. Maybe not next year, next 5 years, 10 years, but long after we're all in a pine box. Who knows how big the staff will be. And there's plenty of room at that technical services building to expand without ever having to worry about moving again for 50 to 100 years. It's rock solid concrete, so it ain't going nowhere. So go for the grant and see what happens.
Anyone else? Moved by Katie Davies, seconded by Ron Forbes, that Zorra Township Council support the Canada Community Revitalization Fund CCRF grant application for the Zorra Municipal Centre. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. There is a second motion on this with respect to public consultation, moved by Katie Davies, seconded by Ron Forbes, that staff be directed to prepare a thorough public consultation plan with respect to options for renovating the existing municipal office and/or moving the municipal office to the technical services on the former Maple Leaf Foods Incorporated property in Tempsford, as well as incorporating a childcare facility and fitness center. Katie, do you want to speak to that?
Timeline here is a big piece of the discussion, and I think Paul mentioned, some discomfort with the not having the ZMF up out of the ground yet and already looking at another big project. I don't like that timeline as well. It does feel like a lot at once, and until certain things settle, it's difficult to stir up too much new dust. But there are things that are available now, and if these time-sensitive opportunities are providing us with the ability to manage our responsibility for providing the office, providing a truly accessible space where when we say in our job postings that we're an equal opportunity employer, that we actually stand by that by having space then for someone in a wheelchair to be able to have an office, use the kitchen, pop into somebody else's office for discussion, go to the washroom, turn in a hallway, that we're actually that equal opportunity employer that we say we are. The other piece of the timeline with this is that if we are going to move forwards, if we do have some success with the grant, that this consultation needs, proper effective consultation takes time. So on one hand, it feels like a lot happening at once, and what are we committing to? But on the other hand, I think that, as the report says, that if we don't get started with some consultation, then we're going to be, again, fighting the clock. And on a project as significant as this, I think the more we hear from residents on what their interests and concerns and thoughts are, it's only going to help us make a better decision.
Yeah, I agree with everything Katie said. There is a feeling that we're moving a little too fast on this, but if we get some public consultation in it, I don't know what form that's going to take. Is it, notices in every mailbox? Is it just on social media? Is it a open house at the building? All of those things. I mean, not that I need to know that. It's just, I don't want somebody to come back and say, wow, I didn't know about it, or there was only the adjoining landowners were notified, like we do when we're attempting to do other projects. So, yeah, I mean, maybe Don would just fill us in on the format that would take.
So my initial thoughts on public consultation for this would be holding likely 2 open houses at each arena, because those would be the rooms that would be big enough for social distancing. And we would also hold a virtual meeting as well. So anyone who didn't want to attend those meetings or was unable to, that we would be able to hold one virtually as well. So yes, we would advertise through social media. Village Voice, if we can get the ads out in time, just to let people know when the open houses would be. We'd likely do it in September. I don't like to hold public consultations in August, just because of vacation time for many residents, so it's not the most effective time, and hopefully September's before harvest, so it would be the best time for majority of the public to attend.
Two questions, Don. One, the motion says prepare a plan. So would that plan come back to council maybe first meeting in September before being rolled out, or actually it could come back first meeting in August before being rolled out? Okay. And secondly, Ron said something in his comments there that made me wonder, would it be possible to do an open house at the technical services building for residents to tour through? Not necessarily in place of one of the others. There's no way we could.
The building's not secure right now. There are trip hazards all throughout. I would be uncomfortable having a meeting there. We could provide a video of the building. I know it's not the same.
That's what I was just going to suggest, like, that's
Okay.
what, how people have been selling houses for the last 18 months is all, and yeah, you could go through and do a virtual tour, which maybe would get around the safety issues, because you bump your head pretty easily in there, as we found out.
Okay.
I question how much value that would be to the public. I mean, unless you have a knowledge of building construction and engineering, to walk into that place, looks like a decrepit old factory building. I don't know if they could grasp it, like, would it prove anything to anyone to tour it?
I think information exchange both ways is hugely important, and to get the feedback on those two, I don't think people are going to have a huge opinion on municipal office other than the cost of it, but to get the feedback on the daycare and the gymnasium part of it, and not only just feedback from within Thamesford, within the whole township, because these are all whole township dollars that we're going to be spending on this. So sure, people that live closest are going to be the biggest benefit, but I can see people driving from Kintore or Uniondale on their way to work in London, dropping off the kids at daycare or Embro or whatever. So if we can have that broad-based feedback, and if we can share as much information of what we have in mind, and try to explain to them how the municipal office ties into this whole thing, and that we can't just, it doesn't make sense to just do a small piece of the building so that we can have the daycare and leave the rest the way it is for now, that it all has to tie in together construction-wise and financially. So yeah, I'm all in favor of some type of a feedback, because, and the other thing is not so much public feedback, but on the daycare, there's supposed to be subsidized daycare coming in that's $10 a day. So what impact does that have on this whole plan? Like, people that would be not being able to afford daycare at this time, maybe in 2 or 3 years, whenever this big federal provincial program comes in. Not only does that, how many people would be using it, but what would be the dollar return when you get government money coming in, like upper level government money coming in, and how does that tie into the whole program? So there is just 150,000 things we don't know about this project yet, and I'm not going to say no to that part of it at this point anyway. But so, yeah, go ahead and find out what's going on.
Anyone else? Moved by Katie Davies, seconded by Ron Forbes, that staff be directed to prepare a thorough public consultation plan with respect to options for renovating the existing municipal office and/or moving the municipal office to the technical services on the former Maple Leaf Foods Incorporated property in Thamesford, as well as incorporating a childcare facility and fitness center. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And that would be at the August 4th council meeting, Don, that we would see, that council would see that consultation plan?
That's correct.
Thank you. So there's not much left on this agenda then. So just, yeah, before I move on, was there anything else, any other like questions for staff or anything while we're all here? Items of community interest? I will say, since we talked about chicken barbecues at the last council meeting, I saw in the Village Voice that the Uniondale firefighters are doing the chicken barbecue again this year. Takeout only, but I got my tickets already, so. Moved by Paul Mitchell, seconded by Steve McDonald, that bylaw 47-21 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held July 21st, 2021 be read a first, second, and third time this July 21st, 2021, and further that the mayor and deputy clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. The deputy clerk part tongue-tied me. Moved by Paul Mitchell, seconded by Steve McDonald, that this session of council be now adjourned and herewith closed at 4:46 p.m. And the next meeting of council will be called for August 4th, 2021 at 9 a.m. in the council chambers of the Township Municipal Office. All those in favor? Opposed?